Dame is about to officially end Indiana's football season. I got the game going on in the background right now. It's 20-3. Notre Dame has the ball. This game is over, and they officially prove that Indiana was in fact overrated this season. Fraudulent, you could also say. But with that being said, Indiana still undoubtedly deserved a spot in the college football playoff. If you go 11-1, and you're in the Big Ten, then you probably deserve to be in. Yeah, and look, let's just be honest. Throughout the years of the college football playoff, there's been more of an emphasis on resume as opposed to who the best teams are. People are going to dogpile on Indiana tonight because they're probably going to get beat 27-3 somewhere in there. But this is probably going to happen to SMU tomorrow. This is probably going to happen to Clemson tomorrow as well. So this isn't the only blowout that we're going to see because that is just the nature of college football. With that being said, even though Notre Dame is clearly superior to Indiana, I wasn't really all that impressed with them. I really haven't been much of this year because when I watch Notre Dame play, first and foremost, obviously way better than Indiana. The defensive front for Notre Dame is good. The offensive line has pushed Indiana around pretty much all game. They've done that to all of the inferior opponents that they've played this season. My concern with Notre Dame going forward is I don't trust Riley Leonard. I just don't think that Notre Dame is going to be explosive enough in the pass game to beat teams like Georgia or Oregon or Ohio State. So while they run the ball well and they control the line of scrimmage, and that's the start to having any sort of good offense, I just don't trust them enough in the pass game. I don't think that they're explosive enough, and that's a combination of Riley Leonard being a good quarterback but not a great one, and receivers just not really having the speed to really stretch you deep. So with that being said, I've got Georgia beating them in the quarterfinals more than likely. Moving on to the games tomorrow, or today, depending on when you're watching this. Clemson in Texas. That is, I think it's the 4 o'clock game tomorrow. We've watched, let's just take Indiana, right? Because that's the easiest team to take. It is so important to have a good offensive line and a good defensive line because anyone who watches football enough knows enough to tell you that if you control the trenches, then you have a great chance at winning these games. When you look at Indiana, when they played against Ohio State, they didn't control the trenches on either side of the ball. We saw them play Notre Dame tonight. They didn't control the trenches on either side of the ball. And when I look at Clemson and Texas, I expect for Texas to control the trenches on both sides of the football. Look, people have been knocking Texas going into this game because they lost to Georgia, arguably the best team in the country, not once but twice, the second game being much closer. This Texas defense is good. It is legit. The offensive line has a ton of talent on it. The question is, does Quinn Ewers come around? I don't think he has to be the best version of himself in order to beat Clemson. I think Texas pushes Clemson around for an hour, and they win that game going away. I don't think it'll be close. Lights being too bright, that's not a thing for Texas. They were in the college football playoff last year, a lot of returners from that team. And on top of it, this is a team yearning to prove themselves, just yearning to beat a really good football team. And they have an option. They have an opportunity to do that against Clemson, pick up their first ranked win of the year, blow them out, and shut everybody up. Not only does Texas win, but they cover the 11.5-point spread. Next game, SMU at Penn State. Look, we're going back to talent in the trenches. Penn State, on the offensive and defensive line, is more talented than SMU. They just are. Drew Aller has been really consistent this year, a guy who coming into the year I had some questions about, but has answered a lot of them, looks really good against an Oregon defense that's one of the better ones in the country. I think this is another game where we just see talent went out. Penn State simply has more talent than SMU. In addition to that, I'm just not convinced that SMU is very good. They're 0-2 against ranked teams this year. They lost by 3 to Clemson, and they lost by 3 to BYU. Two teams that are good, but definitely nowhere near the level of Penn State in terms of achievement this year or in terms of the talent that Penn State has. I expect for Tyler Warren to be an absolute problem for SMU, which isn't really fair to say because Tyler Warren is a problem for absolutely everybody. The one concerning thing for Penn State is this Jennings quarterback for SMU is really good, really athletic. He's going to, take dust and turn it into something positive because he's talented, he's athletic, he's got a big arm, he scrambles to throw the football, which is one of the things that I really like about him. With that being said, I just think that Penn State's got way too much talent on both sides of the ball compared to SMU. Penn State wins and covers the 8.5-point spread. Last game of the night, the big one, the one that everyone's going to be absolutely turned into, Tennessee at Ohio State. And, oh man, I'm going to take Ohio State. That's what I have in my notes. That's what I'm going to say. I think Tennessee covers the 7.5, but Ohio State wins that game. Obviously, the matchup to watch, and the reason why I'm hesitant to take Ohio State is because of the trenches. Like, that Tennessee defensive line is so incredibly dominant. And then you look at this Ohio State offensive line that coming into the year was supposed to be really good, but they lose their starting left tackle, a guy who was going to be a first-round pick, in the game against Oregon, and then they lose their center who tears his Achilles right before the Indiana game. And so, they're missing two of their normal starting five offensive linemen. Obviously, we've seen them play a fair amount without those guys. But that's why I'm hesitant to take Ohio State. But the difference is quarterback. I just trust Will Howard more than I trust Nico Iamaleava, the redshirt freshman who was, highly touted coming out of high school, a guy who's been up and down, been more up as of late, but I saw Will Howard play a perfect game against a good Indiana defense. I saw Will Howard play a really good game against Oregon, so I just have a little bit more faith in him, whereas, I've seen Nico Iamaleava go into Fayetteville, Arkansas and lose, and sure, we saw Will Howard struggle a little bit against Michigan, but I didn't think that was entirely his fault. I felt like just the way that Ohio State attacked that game, they didn't put enough in his hands. They tried to run the ball, I thought, way too much as opposed to trying to win on the outside, which is another reason why I have Ohio State. When you have three NFL-level wide receivers like Ohio State does, and you can just consistently win on the edge, you are going to put up points. This Ohio State defense is really good. Don't know if it's great, but it should be good enough to slow down this Tennessee offense that at times can be explosive, but for the most part has been, much like its quarterback this year, up and down. So I'm taking Ohio State to win, but they don't cover. Should be a fantastic slate tomorrow. I'll be back. Let me think. What's today? Today's the 20th. Christmas week's coming up. I'll probably be in and out doing videos. I'll hopefully have another one up before we get all the second round games going. I know I've got an NBA video coming out later this week, so make sure you subscribe so that you can check that out as well. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to tune in, and I will talk to you again later this week.